What if the future of the Trump empire depended on the one Trump no one expected to lead? For years, Eric Trump has been the quiet, loyal son, managing the family business while his father and brother dominated the spotlight. But now, with legal battles threatening the Trump organization and Donald Trump fighting for a political comeback, Eric is no longer just in the background. He's the last line of defense for the Trump legacy. At 41, he has finally admitted what many suspected. He's not the next Trump politician, but the one keeping the family empire from falling apart. But can he actually save the Trump organization from collapse? As lawsuits and financial troubles mount, is he strong enough to hold it all together? And with Lara Trump stepping into politics, could she be the one who carries the Trump legacy forward instead? Let's dive in. For decades, Eric Trump has stood in the background, loyal, steady, and always by his father's side. While his siblings Ivanka and Donald Jr. often took center stage, Eric remained the quiet enigma. But now, at 41, has he finally revealed what we all suspected? Born on 6 January 1984, Eric Trump entered a world of wealth, power, and extreme privilege. As the middle child of Donald and Ivana Trump, he grew up in Trump Tower, the iconic skyscraper that became synonymous with the family name. But while his last name granted him immediate status, Eric's childhood wasn't without its challenges. Unlike Ivanka, who seemed to effortlessly navigate the high society circles of New York, or Donald Jr., who carried the alpha male energy their father admired, Eric often appeared different. His reserved nature and quieter presence made him less of a public spectacle, which, given the intensity of the Trump brand, was no small feat. The Trump name demanded confidence and dominance, but Eric's early years were shaped just as much by his mother's influence as his father's. Ivana, a former Czech model and businesswoman, played a crucial role in raising her children. She instilled discipline, encouraged ambition, and often spoke of how she ran the Trump household like a business, demanding excellence from all three of her kids. But Eric's world took a drastic turn in 1972 when his parents' high-profile divorce played out in the media. The headlines were brutal. Donald's affair with Marla Maples made front-page news, and the bitter custody battle dragged the Trump children into the spotlight. Eric, only 8 at the time, was suddenly caught between two powerful figures fighting for control. While Donald and Ivana's split was publicly explosive behind closed doors, Ivana maintained primary custody of her children, shaping much of Eric's early life. By many accounts, he spent more time with his mother than his father in those years, and her European upbringing left a lasting impact on him. He spent summers visiting her home country, the Czech Republic, where he developed a love for the outdoors and hunting, activities that later became an integral part of his identity. Despite the privilege, Eric wasn't entirely shielded from expectations. The Trump brand was built on appearances, and for Donald Trump, failure was never an option, especially for his own children. That pressure was ever present. The Trump kids were expected to uphold the family name, project strength, and ultimately contribute to their father's empire. But while Donald Jr. was pushed to be the aggressive businessman and Ivanka was groomed as the polished public face of the company, where did that leave Eric? His school years followed the typical path of the ultra-wealthy. Elite private schools, lavish family trips, and an upbringing most could only dream of. But there was something about Eric's approach that always set him apart. Unlike Ivanka, who strategically placed herself in high-profile circles, or Donald Jr., who lived for the spotlight, Eric remained noticeably quieter. By the time he reached his teenage years, he had grown into the most reserved of the Trump children. While his father thrived in the limelight, Eric preferred to stay behind the scenes, focusing on responsibilities rather than recognition. That personality difference became even more apparent when it came time for college. While Ivanka followed in their father's footsteps, attending the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, Eric made a different choice. He enrolled at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., choosing a major in finance and management, a practical, strategic decision that kept him aligned with the family business, without immediately stepping into his father's shadow. His time at Georgetown was relatively quiet compared to his siblings. He wasn't known for wild parties or tabloid-worthy scandals, nor did he actively seek media attention. Instead, Eric focused on his studies, preparing for the inevitable moment when he would step into the Trump organization and take on his role in the empire. That moment came faster than expected. Even before graduating, Eric was already working within the Trump Organization, learning the intricacies of real estate development, hospitality, and brand expansion. Unlike Ivanka, who often represented the company at high-profile events, or Donald Jr., who took on a more aggressive leadership role, Eric found his niche in operations. He was deeply involved in the management and development of Trump hotels, resorts, and golf courses, a side of the business that required precision but didn't necessarily come with the same public exposure. But even as he stepped into his executive role, Eric's public image remained somewhat of a mystery. He was neither as outspoken as Donald Jr. nor as politically influential as Ivanka. He worked hard, stayed loyal, and upheld the family's vision. But for years, the media struggled to define his place within the Trump hierarchy. To the outside world, it often seemed like Eric was the least significant of the Trump children. While Ivanka cultivated a global brand and Donald Jr. made waves with his political statements, Eric was often portrayed as the quiet middle child, existing in the background of his family's high-stakes world. But that perception wasn't entirely accurate. Those who knew him best described him as methodical, strategic, and fiercely loyal, a key figure in the Trump Organization who preferred to let results rather than words define his role. And while he may not have chased the spotlight, his influence within the family business was growing steadily. By his late 20s, Eric had already overseen multi-million-dollar real estate projects, expanding the Trump brand's reach beyond New York. He became one of the primary figures managing Trump's luxury golf courses, ensuring that they maintained the prestige expected of the family name. His work was largely behind the scenes, but to Donald Trump, that was just as important as any public appearance. For years, Eric seemed content with his place in the Trump empire, a quiet yet powerful force ensuring the smooth operation of his father's business. But everything changed in 2016, when Donald Trump launched his presidential campaign. Suddenly, Eric's role shifted overnight. No longer just a businessman, he was thrust into the political battlefield, defending his father's name and legacy in a way he had never done before. While he had spent most of his life carefully staying out of political controversies, the campaign forced him into the public eye in a way that even he couldn't have anticipated. For the first time, Eric Trump became a political figure, whether he wanted to or not. The Trump name carried power, influence, and expectations. For years, Eric played his role without demanding attention, content with his behind-the-scenes presence in the Trump Organization. But that all changed in 2016 when his father launched his presidential campaign. Eric had always been a businessman first, but as his father's political ambitions took center stage, the family's entire world shifted. Suddenly, loyalty wasn't just about expanding real estate and managing golf courses. It was about stepping up to defend the Trump name in the most contentious election in modern American history. Unlike Ivanka, who positioned herself as the polished, moderate face of the campaign, and Donald Jr., who eagerly took on the role of attack dog, Eric's political involvement was different. He wasn't a natural public speaker, nor did he thrive on confrontation the way his brother did. Instead, he focused on the numbers, the strategy, and the logistics behind the scenes. But staying out of the spotlight wasn't an option. As the Trump campaign faced relentless criticism from the media, Eric found himself thrown into television interviews, press briefings, and rallies, defending his father at every turn. He wasn't as aggressive as Donald Jr., but he adopted his father's rhetoric, fiercely attacking Democrats and the press. One of his most memorable moments came during a Fox News interview in 2016, where he dismissed accusations that his father was racist, sexist, or unfit for office. He framed the criticism as a politically motivated attack, saying, "My father has employed tens of thousands of people, women at the highest levels of our company, people from every background. This is a man who has built the American dream, and now he's being targeted because he's shaking up Washington." It was clear that Eric wasn't just defending his father, he was defending the entire Trump legacy. Beyond the campaign trail, he also took on the massive responsibility of running the Trump Organization while his father was in the White House. While Donald Jr. became the public face of the company, Eric oversaw real estate projects, international business dealings, and brand expansions, a move that sparked controversy almost immediately. Critics argued that the Trump family was profiting off the presidency, raising ethical concerns about conflicts of interest. The Trump Organization had promised to distance itself from government affairs, but the reality was more complicated. Eric pushed back against these claims, insisting that he and Donald Jr. ran the company independently and that his father had zero involvement in business decisions while in office. But the scrutiny didn't stop there. By 2018, multiple lawsuits had been filed against the Trump Organization, including investigations into business dealings, tax practices, and fundraising activities. Eric was called in for questioning about the Trump Foundation, the family's charity organization, which was later shut down after allegations that it had been used for political and personal expenses. It was one of the first major blows to his reputation. Up until that point, Eric had largely managed to stay out of scandal, but the lawsuits and investigations painted a different picture. Still, through it all, he remained unapologetically loyal. In interviews, he defended the Trump brand, insisting that the allegations were politically motivated attacks meant to destroy his father's legacy. Even as the pressure mounted, he continued balancing his roles as a businessman, a political surrogate, and a family man. By this time, Eric's personal life had also changed significantly. In 2014, he married Lara Trump, a former television producer turned outspoken Republican figure. Lara quickly became a rising star within conservative circles, making frequent media appearances and championing her father-in-law's policies. Eric and Lara welcomed their first child, Eric Luke Trump, in 2017, followed by their daughter, Carolina Dorothy Trump, in 2019. For all the political chaos surrounding the Trump presidency, Eric seemed more settled in his personal life than ever before. But that sense of stability wouldn't last forever. As 2020 approached, the Trump family faced an even greater challenge, securing a second term in office. Eric was once again on the front lines of the campaign, raising millions through fundraising efforts and high-profile donor events. But as the election played out, it became clear that the political landscape had shifted. When Joe Biden was declared the winner, the Trump family immediately contested the results, claiming widespread election fraud. Eric took to Twitter, making one of his most controversial statements yet, telling his followers, "We will never stop fighting for our country." He stood firmly with his father and brother as they pushed election fraud claims, attending rallies and speaking engagements to fuel the movement. But after the events of January 6, 2021, when a mob stormed the Capitol, the Trump family faced a new level of scrutiny. While Eric wasn't as vocal as Donald Jr. or Rudy Giuliani in encouraging the protests, he was still linked to the movement that led to the attack. With Trump leaving office, Eric was forced to reckon with his future. The Trump presidency was over, but for Eric Trump, the battle was far from finished. January 20th, 2021 marked the end of his father's time in the White House, but it also marked the beginning of a new era of political and legal challenges for the entire Trump family. For 4 years, Eric had balanced his role as a businessman and political figure, defending his father at every turn. But once Donald Trump left office, the focus shifted, from defending policies to defending the Trump empire itself. Almost immediately, investigations into the Trump Organization intensified. The company had been under scrutiny for years, but without the protection of the presidency, prosecutors moved swiftly. In 2021, New York Attorney General Letitia James announced a sweeping civil investigation into the Trump Organization's business practices. The key question: had the company fraudulently inflated asset values to secure loans while deflating those same values for tax benefits? Eric, as one of the executives running the company, was pulled into the investigation. That year, he sat for a deposition, but what stood out wasn't just his testimony, it was his evasive responses. According to court filings, Eric pleaded the Fifth Amendment more than 500 times, refusing to answer key questions about the company's financial dealings. Critics immediately pounced. For years, the Trump family had mocked individuals who invoked the Fifth Amendment, with Donald Trump himself once saying, "The mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth?" Yet now, Eric was doing exactly that. His legal team insisted that it was a strategic decision, not an admission of guilt. But the optics were undeniable. For the first time, Eric Trump wasn't just defending his father, he was defending himself. Despite the ongoing legal battles, he continued to operate the Trump Organization alongside Donald Jr., focusing on golf courses, real estate, and licensing deals. But behind the scenes, the company was facing serious financial strain. With his father out of office, the Trump brand had lost its political leverage. Several business partners distanced themselves from the company, banks ended relationships, and new deals became harder to secure. Still, Eric remained steadfast. While some speculated that the Trump organization was headed for financial collapse, he publicly dismissed the idea, insisting that the family business was thriving. "We have the greatest properties in the world," he told Fox News in 2021. "People love our brand and we're expanding every day." But the numbers told a different story. In 2021, Forbes estimated that the Trump organization had lost hundreds of millions of dollars in value due to declining revenue from hotels and resorts, the impact of the pandemic, and political fallout. The legal troubles continued piling up. In 2023, Donald Trump, Eric Trump, and Donald Jr. were formally accused of fraudulent business practices, with the state of New York seeking $250 million in penalties. Eric maintained his innocence, calling the lawsuits a politically motivated witch hunt, but behind the scenes, there was no escaping the pressure. The once golden image of the Trump empire was now tarnished, and Eric was one of the men responsible for keeping it from collapsing completely. Still, through all the turmoil, he remained fiercely loyal to his father. Unlike Ivanka, who distanced herself from Trump's legal battles, Eric doubled down, standing by Donald Trump at every court appearance, fundraiser, and political event. He became a fixture at Mar-a-Lago, attending strategy meetings and donor gatherings, making it clear that despite the lawsuits, despite the investigations, the Trump family was not backing down. By 2024, with the next presidential election on the horizon, Eric was once again thrust into campaign mode. His role was less public than before, while Donald Jr. made fiery speeches and Lara Trump took on a more prominent media presence. Eric focused on fundraising and logistics. He worked behind the scenes, ensuring that donors remained committed and financial backing stayed strong. Despite the legal challenges, Trump's political machine was still running, and Eric was one of the key figures keeping it alive. But the biggest question remained, was he positioning himself for something more? For years, there had been speculation that Eric could eventually run for office, following in the footsteps of his father and brother. But whenever the question came up, he sidestepped it, never committing to a clear answer. Then, in mid-2024, a shift happened. For the first time, Eric publicly ruled out the idea of running for office. In an interview, he admitted that he was more interested in business than politics, saying, "Look, I love this country, and I'll always support my father, but my focus is on the Trump organization. That's where I belong." It was a rare moment of clarity. Eric Trump had finally admitted what many had suspected for years. Unlike Donald Jr., who thrived in the political arena, and Ivanka, who had once played a key role in policy discussions, Eric was never truly built for politics. His strengths had always been in operations, management, and maintaining the Trump brand behind the scenes. And now, at 41, he had finally made it clear his future was in business, not in Washington. But even as he stepped back from politics, the Trump name remained a force in Republican politics. And with the 2024 election heating up, his role in the family empire was far from over. Eric Trump might not have been the most vocal member of the Trump family, but he was one of its most essential players, working behind the scenes, making sure that the Trump brand survived no matter what. And with his father's political future still uncertain, one thing was clear. Eric wasn't going anywhere. Eric Trump had spent years defending the family business, standing by his father, and dismissing the legal troubles that surrounded the Trump name. But as 2024 unfolded, it became clear that he wasn't just protecting his father's legacy, he was protecting his own future. For decades, the Trump organization had been the foundation of the Trump family's wealth and power. It was more than just a business. It was the Trump identity itself. But with multiple lawsuits, declining revenue, and a growing number of former allies distancing themselves from the brand, Eric faced an increasingly difficult challenge, keeping the empire afloat in a world that was rapidly changing. By early 2024, the financial reality was undeniable. The company had lost key business partners, international deals had stalled, and the once iconic Trump properties were no longer the gold standard they once were. Eric, however, remained publicly defiant. He insisted that the business was thriving, that the lawsuits were political attacks, and that the Trump name still held global value. "We have the best real estate, the best brand, and the best business in the world," he told supporters at a Mar-a-Lago fundraising event. "We're not going anywhere." But behind closed doors, Eric was making major decisions that would shape the Trump organization's future. One of the biggest shifts came with a renewed focus on international business. With many U.S. banks and corporations distancing themselves from the Trump organization, Eric and Donald Jr. began looking overseas. Reports surfaced that the company was exploring new projects in the Middle East, Asia, and Eastern Europe, where the Trump name still carried weight. Some saw it as a strategic move, a way to rebuild revenue streams without relying on U.S. institutions. Others saw it as a sign of desperation, a last-ditch effort to keep the brand alive in the face of mounting legal pressure. At the same time, Eric was also navigating a shifting political landscape. His father was once again campaigning for the presidency, and while Eric had ruled out running for office himself, he was still deeply involved in the Republican fundraising machine. As one of the key figures overseeing Trump's political fundraising efforts, Eric helped secure millions of dollars in donations, ensuring that the campaign had the resources it needed to take on Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. But as the election heated up, so did the legal battles. In mid-2024, a New York court ruled against the Trump organization, ordering the company to pay a massive financial penalty in connection to fraudulent business practices. For Eric, it was a devastating blow. Not only did it reinforce public perception of corruption within the Trump empire, but it also put immense financial strain on the business he had worked so hard to maintain. Still, he refused to back down. He released a statement calling the ruling a politically motivated attack, telling reporters, "This is what happens when you take on the establishment. They don't just come after one man, they come after his family, his business, and everything he's built." But even within Republican circles, questions were being raised. Would the Trump organization survive these lawsuits? And if it didn't, what would Eric Trump do next? Unlike his brother, who had built a public persona as a conservative firebrand, Eric's entire identity had been tied to the Trump business. If the company collapsed, or if financial penalties forced major sell-offs, he would be left without the one thing that had defined his career. And then, just when things couldn't get any more chaotic, another major shift occurred. His wife, Lara Trump, took on a high-profile leadership role within the Republican Party, becoming one of the most vocal figures in Trump's 2024 re-election campaign. While Eric had chosen to stay out of politics directly, Lara was going all in. She became a key spokesperson, frequently appearing on Fox News, conservative radio shows, and campaign events, defending her father-in-law and pushing Republican messaging. Some began to speculate, was Lara now the more politically ambitious one? Would she be the one to carry the Trump family name forward in politics while Eric focused on business? By late 2024, the Trump family had never been more divided in their roles. Donald Trump was leading the campaign. Donald Jr. was serving as the loudest voice of the movement. Ivanka had distanced herself almost entirely. And Eric? He was still fighting to keep the Trump organization intact. But even as he faced enormous pressure, he remained committed to his father's vision. At a private event, a donor reportedly asked Eric if he thought the Trump brand would ever return to what it once was. His response was simple: "We won't give up. Ever." But for the first time in his entire life, Eric wasn't just fighting for his father's legacy, he was fighting for his own. And as the 2024 election loomed, the stakes had never been higher. The 2024 election was the defining moment for the Trump family. It wasn't just about Donald Trump's political comeback, it was about the future of everything they had built. For Eric Trump, the stakes couldn't have been higher. His entire adult life had been spent managing the Trump organization, defending his father, and ensuring that the family empire remained intact. But as Election Day loomed, there was a growing realization that no matter what happened in politics, the Trump business would never be the same again. By this point, Eric had fully embraced his role as the guardian of the family's financial empire, working behind the scenes while his father and brother dominated the political stage. But there was one thing he had never done: step out of the shadows and fully define himself outside of Donald Trump's legacy. And then, at 41, he finally admitted it. In a rare, candid interview, Eric was asked whether he ever felt overshadowed by his father and brother, whether he had ever considered breaking away from the Trump name and starting something of his own. His answer: "I know exactly who I am. I was born into this. I run this business, and I'm damn proud of it." It was a simple statement, but it was the clearest confirmation yet of what many had suspected. Eric Trump wasn't trying to be his father or his brother. He was trying to be the one who held the family together. For years, speculation had swirled about whether Eric would ever run for office, follow his father's path, or at least take on a more public role in conservative politics. But now, he has made his choice. His future wasn't in the White House. It wasn't in fiery campaign speeches or political rallies. It was in the boardrooms, the real estate deals, and the quiet negotiations that would determine whether the Trump name remained one of power or faded into history. As 2024 came to a close, Eric's role became even clearer. Donald Trump was focused on his political legacy. Donald Jr. was the public warrior, taking on opponents in the media. Ivanka had stepped back, choosing to distance herself from the political chaos. And Eric? He was the silent operator, making sure that even if the Trump political brand collapsed, the Trump business would survive. But that didn't mean he was done fighting. With millions of dollars in legal penalties hanging over the Trump organization and new financial pressures mounting, Eric was now tasked with restructuring the entire company, finding new ways to generate revenue, cutting deals with international investors, and ensuring that the family's real estate empire remained strong. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about survival. And for Eric Trump, the man who had spent his life avoiding the spotlight, staying in the background, and quietly handling the family's financial empire, this was the moment where he truly stepped into his own. But even as Eric committed to the long-term survival of the Trump organization, questions remained. Could he actually restore the business to its former glory? Or was he simply managing a slow decline? The real estate market had changed, and with Trump properties under heavy scrutiny, the brand's ability to attract high-end investors was no longer guaranteed. Many financial institutions had distanced themselves from the Trump name, forcing Eric to seek alternative funding sources in international markets. Reports surfaced that the Trump organization was exploring real estate projects in the Middle East and Asia, where the family's political controversies held less weight. Some saw this as a strategic pivot, a way to rebuild the business on a global scale. Others saw it as a sign of desperation, a move forced by financial necessity rather than opportunity. But Eric wasn't one to admit weakness. He continued pushing forward, telling business associates that the Trump organization was entering a new phase of growth, one that would outlast the political battles and allow the family to maintain its real estate dominance. Still, even as Eric focused on keeping the company afloat, his own role within the family was evolving. Lara Trump, his wife, had become a central figure in conservative politics, taking on a leadership position within the Republican Party, and becoming one of the most vocal defenders of Trump's re-election bid. With Lara stepping further into the political arena, it raised new questions. Was she now the more politically ambitious one? Would Lara be the one to step into the role that many had expected Eric to take? The contrast between the two became increasingly clear. Lara was making speeches, attending political events, and engaging with voters. Eric was sitting in executive meetings, handling legal battles, and negotiating real estate deals. It was a dynamic that few had predicted, but as time went on, it seemed to solidify Eric's true position within the Trump family. He wasn't a politician, he wasn't a public fighter, he was the executor, the operator, the man tasked with making sure the Trump empire didn't collapse under the weight of its own controversies. And that was something he finally admitted, whether publicly or privately, at 41. The Trump organization had been built over decades, and it had weathered countless scandals. But with legal battles still unfolding and financial pressures mounting, the next few years would determine whether Eric was truly capable of holding it all together. There was no safety net, no guarantee that the Trump brand would survive intact. If the lawsuits drained too much of the company's finances, if investors pulled out, or if public interest shifted away from Trump properties, then Eric's entire career could collapse with it. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come that far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.